Few things about Dave. As Tomio had said, Dave is Sansei, as I am. I am not even beginning to say that I'm bilingual, but Dave is definitely fluent in Japanese, both written and speaking. And so thank you, Dave, for coming tonight. It's fascinating. I did pick up a little of the Japanese program the other night that he spoke, and it's really fabulous. Dave received his PhD from the University of Washington at the School of Forestry. Okay, good, got that. And spent 18 years as a member of a wandering tribe of scientists who traveled the Pacific Rim, trying to figure out the Pacific Northwest earthquake hazards. And kind of traveled all over the place, including Alaska, Chile, Japan. And he got involved, and he'll probably talk a little bit about this, how he got involved with the book and the travels throughout Japan in his role, a very significant role. And we just want to note that Dave not only traveled throughout Japan, but he actually helped do a lot of the hands-on research. And even today, he is one of our columnists for our newspaper. So we're really pleased to have you here to give this talk. And what we'll do is Dave will give his talk with slides. We have another handout. Please take notes. If you have any questions, you can just hold your questions, and then we'll have some time at the end. So thank you, Dave, so much for coming, and I'd like to introduce Dave Yamaguchi.
Let's see. Ivan?
Yeah. He's catching the lights.
Thank you, Mr. Moriguchi and Elaine. Both of them are, as people who live here know, real sort of movers and shakers in the community. And so when Elaine calls you up and says, "Hey, David, can you do this?" It's pretty hard to say no. Let's see. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming. I know that everyone has a busy schedule, and so I appreciate that you've all taken the time to come. As Elaine mentioned, last month we hosted this talk in Japanese, mainly as an outreach experiment to see if the people who come shopping at Wajimaya on the weekends on Saturday would come to a talk. And I guess Elaine received a number of calls saying, "Hey, we'd like to hear the talk in English," basically because very few Japanese Americans speak Japanese anymore. And so the idea was that, well, because they already had the advertising and everything kind of pretty much already ready to go in Japanese, they could just translate it and send it back out. So the Japanese parable or saying for this is "iseki nicho," which is one stone, two sparrows. So that's what today's talk is. So let's go ahead and just get started. Okay, so we'll see how this works. So 2 years ago, I was just like everyone else, and reading. I read the New York Times every morning, and reading the New York Times, and as well as watching the TV news, I was struck with two emotions on learning of the earthquake and tsunami disaster in Japan. The first feeling that I think all people feel, of course, is just great sorrow for the experiences and tragedies of the Japanese people, and especially of the people who live in the Tohoku region of northeast Honshu. Today we know that about 19,000 people died on that day. Either died or disappeared, that's a lot of people in one day. And most of those deaths were not from the earthquake. Just only a few from the earthquake, but it was primarily the tsunami, and not so much the onrushing of the waves, but more commonly the section afterwards. We've all been on the beach and you feel a wave come in, and a wind-driven wave come in, and then the section of the waves come out. Well, these tsunami waves are much larger, and so the section when the waves move out is comparably large. Next slide. Okay, next slide. I think at the same time, all of us also felt this same kind of morbid fascination with watching these waves move. This is probably the first time in the world when we've had live helicopter footage from the air, watching these waves sweep inland from bays. This is near Miyako, the city of Miyako here. And there's cars, vans in the waves for scale. I have seen a lot of pictures of these kinds of things over the last 2 decades, but I've never seen them move. And so I was pretty much, probably like anyone, just gripped with any moving image of these waves that I could find. And in Japan, there's a television show called Sekai Fushigi Hakken, which is about world kind of strange phenomena. And they have actresses, and they kind of take you on these world tours, weekly Friday night episodes, or they take you to the Egyptian pyramids and all these kind of weird and fascinating things that we might never see in our own lifetimes. And so watching these events unfold on the evening news, to me, felt very much like watching that Japanese TV series. Okay, after those first two sort of human emotions, though, a third and fourth thoughts crept into me, to my mind. And the first of all, the one thing we'll all ask is, well, how well prepared was Japan for these events? And then the second related question that comes right after that is, how well prepared are we? Let's see, next slide. So, the scale of the disaster, I think we all have a good feeling for it now. In last week's North American Post, there was a brief front page story on the tons of debris that are expected to come hit our shores, over each month over the summer and into the fall. And I can't remember how many tons per month, but it's just huge. Basically the contents of seashore communities that were just entirely drawn out to sea by those waves. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so let's quickly review what's going on here. Japan. Okay, so the left part of the slide there, the yellow slab is Japan, and then beneath Japan is this other yellow slab that's going down, and that's the floor of the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is growing in the center, and then it spreads out towards the edges, and it becomes too large for the floor of the Pacific Ocean, and so it starts to tuck underneath the continents. And these are rocks, sheets of rocks pressing against one another, and they tend not to want to slide smoothly, and so at some point they get stuck, and then they start pulling down the edges of the continental plates, and then at some point, when the rocks can no longer hold the friction, the oceanic plate suddenly shoots down. Okay, and that's the earthquake. As a part of that process, the pressure is taken off the upper plate, and that plate springs up and lifts all the water on top of it. Okay. And so that's the origin of the tsunami. And this connection between earthquakes and tsunamis has been known in Japan for centuries. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the reason we are also a part of this picture is that the red lines are where such plate contacts or subduction zones occur around the Pacific Ocean. And this is called the Ring of Fire. Okay, and a lot of you went to Pacific Northwest or Seattle Public Schools, something like that, like we did, right? And so all I remember is elementary school, junior high school, college. We're always hearing about the Ring of Fire, the Ring of Fire. It's like, we don't want to hear any more about the Ring of Fire. We don't care about the Ring of Fire. And then all of a sudden, things like Mount St. Helens start to erupt. And then we start to say, oh yeah, what did they say about that? And maybe this starts to matter. Okay, so, okay, next slide. Yes. Okay, so if we bring the questionings back to Japan for a little bit, if we go back to the first question, how well prepared was Japan for these kinds of events? On the plus side, they were the best prepared in the world for tsunami disasters. Okay. On the minus side, after the dust cleared and scientists around the world began to discuss these kinds of things over the internet, people began to realize that Japan made a critical mistake. Okay, in that they planned and did all their disaster planning based on the most likely earthquake to occur, which is a magnitude 7 event, based on what they've had in the historical past. And so they said, okay, we're most likely to face a magnitude 9 or 7 event. So we will build tsunami walls that will protect our coasts for waves of that height. Right? And so what's actually happening here is that the ocean is pouring over these pretty substantial tsunami walls. The walls are high enough so that when you're driving along this road, you can't see the ocean. It's just, it's several car heights of concrete. What they didn't do is they didn't sit down and think about, well, instead of the most likely event, maybe we should build our coastal defenses to withstand the very worst that can happen in 1,000 years. Something more on that time scale. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Okay. As the world began to examine this further, it becomes obvious that Japan has had a lot of major tsunami disasters going back into the distant past, but we don't have to go back very far at all. For example, this is a tsunami stone erected by people living in a small village called Anayoshi in 1933. And on the stone there it says a little bit, a large tsunami and some other things, and then the date. And in this particular village, this stone marks how far up valley the tsunami came. And so, but if you just go back a little bit further in northern Japanese history, back to 1896, there's another tsunami that killed about 22,000 people. And similar events like this go back into the past, I think into the 800s or so in northern Japan. And so all of this kind of fuzzy sort of human historical evidence had been set aside by Japanese engineers with the mentality that, well, they're engineers, they know, right? Geologists who, and historians who look at these kinds of things, what do they know, right? So it turns out that, that there is something to be learned from listening to people outside of your own discipline, right? Okay, moving on. Okay, so moving on to the next question I raised earlier, which was how well prepared are we? We have been getting ready for a magnitude 8 event here. Let's see if I can get it right. Since the late 1980s. Okay, so over 25 years now, we've been thinking magnitude 8. Okay, so which is one order of magnitude higher than Japan already. And then we've been thinking magnitude 9s since the mid-1990s, for about 19 years now. Okay, so